strange. Strange story. Ezekiel was one of God's prophets, and one of the things about prophets is that, well, they were peculiar, to say the least. They did some really strange things to get their point across. It'd be like me trying to do a handstand this morning where I would just fall right flat on my face because I couldn't possibly do that, at least not in my own strength. But we have this picture of this prophet, Ezekiel, who God lays his hand on him and takes him out and puts him in the middle of a valley. And the only thing in that valley is a bunch of dry bones. And there were a lot of dry bones in that valley. It was like a battlefield where a battle had taken place and there would have been nobody left to bury those who had been slain. And God and Ezekiel walked around in those bones and looked, and Ezekiel tried to take it all in, and I'm sure he was wondering, what in the world am I doing here? He just simply could not understand everything that he saw. He didn't comprehend what it was that he was doing. And finally God says, Ezekiel, can these bones live? I love Ezekiel's response. It's like he's saying, I'm not too sure about this one, God. Doesn't look too promising to me. Oh, Lord, you know. There's some things about life that we just simply can't begin to comprehend. We can't always understand what's going on around us, but I get a feeling that we're kind of living in a time when there's a lot of dry bones. A lot of people who are dealing with all different kinds of discouragement and fear and worry and frustration and concern about all kinds of things. I get so tired of hearing about all the things that are wrong with the church. Why doesn't somebody write what's right with the church? That was quite an experience for Ezekiel as he walked about those bones, and as all of a sudden he is told to prophesy to the bones, and he prophesied to the bones, and next thing you know, should have brought some drumsticks up here so I could clank them together. But I'd trip over the drums back there and make a real sound, so I won't do that. But there was a clanking together of bones. Bones came upon their bones, and that must have been an awesome sound in that valley. All of this clink, clink, clank, clink, clank, clink, 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 clank, 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 clank. And then sinew came on the bones. Anybody know what sinew is? What is it? Hold the bones together, yeah. It's that material that if you mess up, you got aching joints, so to speak. The sinew came on, and then next thing you know, there's some skin on those bones, and you got a valley now filled with what? Lifeless bodies. And so Ezekiel is told, prophesy to the winds, the four winds, and have them come and breathe on these lifeless bodies and watch what happens. Wind and spirit are the same word in the Old Testament. I kind of like it. It's called ruah. 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 As the Spirit breathed life into those bodies, and the next thing you know, they're standing upright on their feet, probably shaking their heads, saying, "Where are we? What happened?" As the power and the presence of God breathed life into that which, for all practical purposes, there seemed to be absolutely no hope. I mean, we're told the bones were not only dry, but they were very dry. Kind of get that picture of Death Valley where you got, the old steer head out there, the skull out there with the long horn still sticking out of it. And sometimes in the midst of our times of despair and darkness and fear and frustration, we feel like we're perhaps dry bones. Life has a way of doing that to us because there's so much that we tend to focus our attention on that we lose sight of the reality that God's presence and power and spirit is still with us with ruah, seeking to bring new life. Every year at annual conference, there's a sad service that takes place where there is the closing of churches across the conference. There'll be some again this year. Places where the life of God's Spirit and power and presence has been there available to people who had seek to work and to bring about hope and possibility and newness of life, to bring people from the darkness of sin into the light of God's holy presence, to be renewed and redeemed. And somewhere along the way, something happened. As we gather here this morning, may the ruah of God's Spirit be with us. And if we're in one of those dry places in our lives, if we're in one of those situations where there doesn't seem to be any hope for the future, if we're in one of those places where we've been through so much, where we've endured so much that we know that we need a rebirth. Let us know that God is always present with us and capable of doing for us and within us and among us those things which none of us can do for ourselves. Last week we looked at the 23rd Psalm, and one of the lines in the Psalm is, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." The place where Ezekiel found himself. The place where the nation Israel had been in exile so long that they had lost all hope of the possibility of them ever being restored. And the Spirit of God, the Ruah, comes in and says, "I ain't through with you yet." Excuse me, English teachers, I said ain't. But God's not through with us. God's been working for several years to get this church to come to a place where we have a united vision for what it is that we're to be about as a place where God's Spirit dwells within the hearts and the lives of people. so that there is the possibility for us to make disciples for the transformation of the world with love and care. And so hope is eternal in the eyes of our God. And even when it seems that all is lost, when the breath ceases to work within our lungs, God is still with us, bringing us into his holy presence. Not for a few days, but for eternity. Can these bones live? It's time for the redeemed to say, yes, Lord. You can breathe life into us. Do you feel the ruah beginning to stir? As we move into what will be this last week of Holy Week coming up next Sunday with the procession of the palms, we like the celebration part of the waving of the palms, but we don't want to have anything to do with that cross that's down there at the end of the week. But if we don't have anything to do with the cross at the end of the week, then the waving of our palms will be in vain. Ruah. May God be with us. May God renew us, transform us, sustain us. Breathe into our hearts that breath of life. That we might be the church of Jesus, not the dead Christ, but the living Christ. So be it. Amen.